so much, Christina's. Joe Mundo was going to be our musician today, and he was having a medical procedure. He wasn't quite sure where that was going to lead him, and so he asked if we could find someone else. And so we shook up Christina's world, and here she is and doing a fantastic job. That happens sometimes, doesn't it?
Yes.
You're just going along in life, and then bam, something shifts, something changes. There's something unexpected. And certainly that happened for me. I was up very early this morning, completely rewriting my talk. If you haven't heard, there were 2 mass shootings in 2 days here in our country. And it shook me. I mean, the first one, I was like, oh, not again. And then to wake up in the morning and learn there was another one just devastated me. And I'm not sure why, at this point in time, it's hitting me the way it's hitting me. But it is, and I have to be authentic to that. We've been talking about the 5 basic unity principles and how wonderful our life can be if we work with these principles. And I've started out each subsequent talk with a review, and today's not going to be any different in that regard, but roll up your sleeves, take off your jacket, because we're going to wrestle with this stuff today. Because how can you say God is good when our country is going through what it's going through right now? But a principle is a fundamental truth or proposition that serves as the foundation for a system of belief or behavior or for a chain of reasoning. We all have a chain of reasoning that we're going through right now as we deal with 29 unnecessary deaths caused by deliberate violence. And so there's an invitation today to view these 5 principles through that lens and see where you go with it. It's so easy to pray for the happy, sappy stuff. It's so easy to pray for abundance. It's so easy to pray for peace and love and joy. And it's hard to tap into that when you're facing something this ugly. So I'm with you. If you're there, I'm with you. And I've been distinguishing principle from dogma. Dogma being a principle or set of principles laid down by an authority as incontrovertibly true. Because I've issued the invitation to play with the principles that we're working with, and reminding everyone that over the years that Unity has put forth these principles, that Unity as an organization has played with these principles, wording them this way and that way, Christianizing them, de-Christianizing them, deifying them, de-deifying them. And different congregations have played with the wording of these principles to try and tap into something that they know is there, that they know is true, that they want to play with because it enriches their lives. And it's my hope by reviewing these principles that each and every one of us are going to find that, even if it's beyond words for us, find that ultimate high truth. We talked about, are we Christian? The very first day that I spoke, we talked about, are we Christian? And what I propose is not that we declare a religious identity for ourselves, but that we create a safe space for everyone to explore whatever identity they're exploring in their lives. Principle 1. God is all there is, present everywhere, and absolute good. I'm wrestling with that today. I invite you to wrestle with that today. Where is God in the midst of violence? How do we say that God is good, absolute good, and everywhere? Well, I can point to 29 lives that aren't being lived this moment here on earth because of the violence. It's a tough one. But if you'll indulge me, let's proceed with this idea that God is absolute good everywhere present. Will you hold that as a high truth with me throughout the day today? And see where it leads us. Human beings are created in the image of God, and our very essence is divine, therefore we are inherently good. All of us? Yeah, all of us. Will you play with that with me today? Despite what we have witnessed, despite what we have known, will you play with a higher truth? Every one of us is an individualized expression of the divine. Every one of us comes from that place of being ultimate good. And 3, we create our life experiences through our way of thinking. We're going to talk about this a little bit more later. Because did the victims create their own reality? Did the victims create through their thought this victimization? I absolutely refuse to believe it so, and yet this is what I'm saying today. We create our reality. We create our life experiences through our way of thinking. I think that bears a little bit of exploration in light of what's going on in current events. Specifically today, we're exploring prayer. Principle number 4 says that our lives can be changed and transformed through the power of prayer. I had wanted to come in here and share stories about how my life has been transformed through the power of prayer. I had wanted to come in and talk a little bit about my journey with prayer, and suddenly, whether or not I'm prosperous just doesn't matter to me. Suddenly, I want to go farther than what can prayer do for me. So let's talk a little bit about prayer. If you ask someone on the street, what is prayer? The most common answer you're going to hear is that prayer is talking to God. Prayer is talking to God. This is the broadest understanding of what prayer is. And the truth is that prayer is not any one thing. It certainly can be talking to God. In fact, in ministry, we have names for the different ways that we pray as a matter of talking to God. We have intercessory prayer, where I try to intervene in what's going on for someone else. I pray for intercession in Christine S.'s life, that she may have a positive experience and know the fullness of her being as a musician, for example. I intercede using the power of prayer. I intercede on someone else's behalf. There's supplicatory prayer. It's a very common type of prayer where we're asking, we are a supplicant, we ask God. Sometimes plead and beg God for something, for ourselves perhaps. That is a very well-known form of prayer to me throughout the entirety of my life. I'll tell you, there have been some supplicatory prayers that would bring tears to your eyes. I prayed them so devoutly, so genuinely. And there are lamentations. Just lamenting of your life to God. I did a pretty solid lamentation this morning. Prayer of lamentation. Seems a little contrary to this teaching that we have of being affirmative, of being positive, of staying in the light. Everything is good, everything is God, everything is joy. But we'll get to that. At Unity, what we teach specifically is affirmative prayer. Some people get so into it they become chaplains. And they continue their study of affirmative prayer, and they continue their practice of affirmative prayer. And the reason why is it serves them, and they see the benefit to others, to this community. Affirmative prayer is the type of prayer I practice most. I absolutely believe in the power of affirmative prayer. I believe in the prospering power of affirmative prayer. I believe in the healing power of affirmative prayer. And if you're stalwart enough to come back next week, I'm going to teach you some ways of doing affirmative prayer. You don't know it yet, but for the past 4 weeks, 5 weeks already, I've been teaching you how to do affirmative prayer. We're going to put it all together. I'll give you the tools next week. See, there's a common misconception about this philosophy, and not just unity, but this idea of positive thinking, this idea of mindfulness, this idea of creating our reality. I encountered it rather suddenly when I met my younger son's girlfriend for the first time. My younger son was having a mental health crisis, and he decided to go to the hospital and seek some help. And his girlfriend, who was a delightful lady, I'd never met her before, I think she's 23, she's in the university, studying at the university, and has the brightest outlook on life I think I've ever encountered from anyone. And I think that's why my son is so attracted to her. She is a ray of sunshine. You hear that about people? Oh, she's a ray of sunshine. This girl is a ray of sunshine. And boy, did she get on my nerves. Because when I met her and my son was going through a crisis, and he was brave enough to admit, hey, I'm going through a crisis, and he was seeking help, she didn't want anything to do with that. Oh, don't say that, she would say when he was trying to explain what he's going. Don't say that. Turn it around. Make it positive. Oh, don't go on medications. It'll dull your senses. You won't be your real self. You can do this through the power of your mind. You can get through this. You don't need mental health drugs, or you don't need to go to someone and talk about how broken you are. You need to stay in the light. You need to stay positive. There's a word for that. There's a phrase for that. Name it.
I can see it.
Spiritual bypass.
There it is.
Spiritual bypass. There's something absolutely crucial about being authentic in this work. I told Christine S. this morning, I said, I might cry. Because I was practicing my talk this morning and I couldn't get through it without crying. Because I'm grieving today. I don't know what to do about that except to ask you all to accept me as I am in this moment, and to honor that I am authentically in grief today, and to not see that as a negative thing, but to understand that God created me perfect. I believe that, and therefore grief is part of my process. My prayer partner for many years, Michael Ludwig, many of you know, he's a musician in the New Thought movement. He and I were prayer partners for years. We met once a week and prayed with each other. And he coined the term, let me get it right, oh boy, complementary emotions. Because I was struggling with this idea that we have of negative emotions. And I said, grief isn't negative. In my experience, I only grieve what I love. I only grieve what I care about. Grief, to me, is, if you're going to put it in a rubric of God qualities, falls under love. It's a human expression of love. And yet we vilify it because it's uncomfortable. Grief is uncomfortable. Grief makes us cry. It turns our eyes red. It makes our nose run. And if you're like me, it makes you honk and snort and make animal noises. It's unattractive. It's uncomfortable. It's not a part of myself I willingly share. But sometimes it creeps up on me. And it just leaks out my eyes. I think the misconception arises because of some of the terminology that we use. You know, we're a positive spirituality, and the opposite of positive is negative. And culturally, semantically, negative has a meaning in people's lives, such as negative emotions, which is why I like changing that to complementary emotions. So if we're positive, then anything negative is outside our paradigm, is what I think people's thought process becomes. And I'm here to tell you that's not been my experience. That's not been my experience at all. It's the spiritual bypass that prevents us from moving forward in our spiritual growth, in our spiritual development. And it's authenticity, and there's nothing negative in my mind about authenticity. It's authenticity that helps us move forward. I know I've told you all about Joanne Wood's experiment in affirmations. And she came to a slightly different conclusion than I came to. But if you look at the results of the study that she did, it was the people who felt like they were lying, the people who came in whose positivity level was only at a 2 out of 10, that felt worse afterwards. It wasn't until someone came in with a positivity level of 5 or 6 out of 10 that they said, okay, yeah, when I left I felt a 7. But if they came in with a 3, they left with a 1. Because saying I am lovable, I am lovable, I am lovable was not enough. It wasn't true for some people. And so what the process was in their head was, this is a lie. I'm lying to myself. No one believes this. And it created the opposite effect because there wasn't an authenticity. We talked a few weeks ago about if you're living in a place of not enough, work on enough. If you're living in a place of not enough, working on opulent wealth is going to be an extremely rocky road. But if you're at not enough and you want to be at enough, that's doable. That's doable, and it's not the end. It's just a step. And you get there through being authentic about it. So how do we deal with this principle that says we create our life experiences through our way of thinking? Does a cancer patient create his leukemia? Not possible. Absolutely not possible. Does a murder victim create his victimhood? I can't believe it. It doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever. See, there's truth, and then there's truth. There's the truth of my being, which is today I'm sad, which doesn't sound at all like a description of God, but it certainly describes me. I'm sad. Then there's high holy truth. We're talking about prayer today. And prayer helps us move from my truth to spiritual truth without dishonoring my experience. Now, Einstein is credited with a quote. I love this quote. Einstein is credited with this quote, and I'm telling you, I have looked and looked and looked and looked. The man never said this. If he had said this, it'd be out there somewhere. He said something similar in a joint paper that he wrote with another scientist. But he didn't say this, as far as I can tell. He said, you cannot solve a problem with the same thinking that caused the problem. That's the quote that's credited to him. So even though we don't have Dr. Einstein's credentials behind that, does that ring true to you? Can we eradicate hate with hate? Can we get rid of fear with more fear? Can we do away with violence by doing more violence? History says no. one time at the beginning of my journey. Said, I'm an adult survivor of child sexual abuse. I've been very open about that. That was a very painful part of my life still when I began on this journey. Said, how did I create that for myself? Someone tell me that a 7-year-old brings that on herself. And someone else said, yeah, I was thinking about that too. I was thinking actually about Hitler. You can't tell me that Hitler was a creation of his victims. Oh, Dallas is calling me on the carpet. Well, what about this, Dallas? What if there are certain things that are created by a global consciousness?
Right.
What if there are some things, like illness, that are created by a global consciousness? If that's true, it takes a global shift in consciousness to change it. It takes a global shift in consciousness. So what is our individual responsibility to a global shift in consciousness? It's working on us. It's working on us as an individual. It's doing our personal prayer work. It's us being the example out in the world. My granddaughter Sandra made a comment on a political post either her dad or my husband had made, and said, protests never work. You know, I would disagree with that. As a woman who votes in this country, I would disagree that protests don't shift things. You get enough people together and things shift. They shift on an emotional level, they shift on a psychological level, they shift on a personal, spiritual level, and they shift at the level of global consciousness. But the only person we can work on is ourselves. In 2018, youth in the New Thought movement issued a statement after some significant gun violence in our country. I'm pretty impressed with it, actually. You can tell it's written by youths, and at the same time, man, there's nothing quite as powerful as the consciousness of a child, is there? They wrote, at this moment in history, we are calling BS on old thoughts and demanding new thoughts and new action. We know, believe, and demand that every single person in this country be safe from all gun violence. That's affirmative. We know, believe, and demand that the youth in our communities, our friends, should not feel afraid when attending school. We know, believe, and demand that people of color be protected and better served in areas where firearm violence and death are routine. We know, believe, and demand that it is so, and we call BS on any so-called political reality that has kept it from happening thus far. It is done as we believe. It is done now, and so it is. What do you think our world's going to be like in 20 years? When those are voting adults. Bring it, right?
Yeah.
Well, bring it on.
Some get to vote next year.
Some get to vote next year, yes. Now, at Unity of Tacoma, no one will tell you how to vote. It is very likely that we all have the same concept of what we would like to see in this world. But I will not and cannot comment on my own personal political beliefs from up here. I can only say that for someone like me who's not much of an activist, that's never been my calling so far, that's shifting. I've never been much of an activist. Voting is one of the few activist type things that I do, that I put out there. We have to be authentic with ourselves. And in order to be authentic with ourselves, we have to know who we are as individuals. And the flip side of prayer is meditation. And when I talk about meditation, I'm talking about silent meditation. I'm not talking about guided meditation or meditation with music in the background or contemplation on one thing. In this instance, those are all legitimate forms of meditation, but in this instance, I'm talking about silent meditation. Silent meditation has done for me several things. One of the things that it's done for me is it's helped me discipline my mind to recognize my thoughts as they are happening and release them when they do not serve me. Meditation has helped me understand where I am emotionally, say I am sad, but I don't live there. I had a minister who once said, it's yea though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death. It's not yea though I set up my tent and make camp in the valley of the shadow of death. You got to go through the valley sometimes. Just don't stay there. But when you're there, admit you're there. Admit you're there. Be authentic to yourself and learn to listen. Listening has helped me know where I am with prosperity, how I feel about money, how I feel about my life, how I'm showing up as my life. It's also helped me understand who I am as an activist. I'm definitely a thoughts and prayers person. That's why I'm doing what I'm doing. I'm a thoughts and prayers person, and I am a legal type person. My way of dealing with my form of activism, let's say, is prayers and minding my thoughts and doing my best to put good thoughts and good ideas out into the world. It's also to watch the judicial process and the legislative process. I am following Flores v. Barr, where Sarah Fabian for our government stood up and told three federal judges, that children shouldn't be allowed toothbrushes and soap.
Say that again.
Sarah Fabian, attorney for our government, stood up in front of three federal judges in June and argued that toothbrushes, blankets, dark time, soap were not necessary for a safe and sanitary environment. You know, the last time we had concentration camps in this country was 1942. Franklin Delano Roosevelt signed Executive Order 9066 and incarcerated all people of Japanese descent. Let me tell you what that did to Bainbridge Island. You want to bring it close to home? Do a little bit of reading about what that did to Bainbridge Island. Read the local newspaper. It's actually been scanned for posterity so as not to lose those articles, because the owners and editors of the local Bainbridge Island newspaper spoke out in the Bainbridge Review. That's activism. They listened to what was calling them forth. Until now, I have not been called to march, to rally, been called to prayer. That's shifted for me. I think if the right occasion arose, I wouldn't be the one to organize it, but I would step in. I would step in because what's going on in this world means something to me. It bothers me to see violence again and again and again. There's got to be a better way. I'm probably more inclined to do something to create a place for those youth that spoke up, to continue to speak up, to show up for them, to encourage them. That's generally where I'm called to serve, to encourage others to follow their path, to teach others to listen to their heart of hearts. Today I wanted to end on this high note with your meditation. What does Spirit call you to express more of in your life? But I can't do that today. Not today. There's a place for that, but not today. Today I would ask you, what is Spirit calling you to be in the world, to create a better world, to create a safe world. And to listen to that. Let's move into meditation, shall we? Unity of Tacoma is an online church with a physical presence in Tacoma, Washington. We invite you to join us, whether online or in person, for our autumn program beginning September 1st, Power Up, with Reverend David Elliott. See you there.